everyone. Welcome back to the ABM Voice Podcast. It's your host, Arun Gopalaswamy. Today, I have this pleasure of speaking to the awesome Amber Bogie, the Senior Director, Growth Marketing at ReachDesk. She's an award-winning marketer, a future CMO, and many more molded into one. Let's welcome Amber to the show. Welcome, Amber. Happy Friday. It's good to have you here.
Thanks for having me and happy Friday.
Thank you. Amber, let's just start with a quick introduction. I know I've covered a little bit, but if there's anything else that we haven't read about you, known about you, why don't you just give us some background?
Well, I am, a revenue marketer. That's really how I describe myself. I've been working in this space for over 10 years and I have found my home in B2B software. And I'm currently leading the demand gen function at ReachDesk. And it has been a real pleasure to take on the role at ReachDesk and to do what I kind of have been referring to as marrying demand gen with ABM. As someone who spent like a good 7 years doing strictly ABM, I witnessed a lot of the challenges and silos in the separate teams and strategies. And so I wanted to take that on and bring that together and drive success.
Great. I think we'll talk a lot about the marriage and intersection of ABM and demand gen today. Uh, I'm curious to sort of learn about your marketing journey so far, the last 10 years or so. When do you start? When do you get really interested in marketing? What is that you like in marketing?
Well, it's a funny question to answer, and it kind of, for me, it kind of goes back to I was at a dinner about a month ago with Path Factory, actually meeting with a bunch of marketers in Austin, and their head of strategy, Morale, as he was introducing and speaking with everyone, he wanted to do kind of like a soft intro of everybody and have themselves say their names, so the kind of get to know you. And so he had everybody share what their first job was and whether or not they got into marketing intentionally or accidentally.
Hmm.
And the majority of people, it's accidental. And I recently saw a post on this from someone else who asked the same question. And so you can guess I'm an accidental marketer. So I found my way into marketing by way of filling out a survey about a website as I was a customer success. I was the person that answered the phones and helped you at a company. And I took a lot of time to think about the website experience and what people were telling me when I was on the phone with them and issues that I was having navigating as I was placing live orders. And at 22 maybe years old, that caught the eye of the director of marketing, and I moved into marketing. So that's how I started in marketing. And like
Hmm.
those accidental marketers, I had no
Did,
idea.
did he did he mention what is that he liked about what your observations or anything like that that triggered his curiosity?
Oh, well, I had initially applied for the role in
I see.
marketing, and I was
Hmm.
not hired based on my lack of experience. And it was a very validating moment for me to prove myself
Hmm.
because I was very young and I didn't know that I was adding value. And what I was doing, I was just giving my honest thoughts and feedback. And so this was a very interesting experience where they said to me when they offered me the job, we didn't think that you had enough experience and you impressed us. I ended up getting to lead a website rebrand project after initially kind of coming into the role.
Got it. Sounds like a good accident.
It was a really good accident because I had a very, very short time in like a what was an inbound, or sorry, what was an inside sales role, which is today is referred to as like a BDR team. And
Hmm.
this is many years ago, so I know a little more these days. But I found myself not strong in that area and wanting to, I joke, like, I just wanted to give everything away. I wanted to do everything that that person was asking for. I was just much more marketing focused. I was always
Hmm.
thinking about the customer and the prospect and what it was like for them. Needless to say, I ended up in the right space.
Hmm. Very nice. And what after that? Like, what else did you do the next 9 years?
Well, I had a few different entry roles. I started in event planning, and I like to say that when you figure out your kind of space in marketing, a lot of times it's identifying the things that you don't love to do. So, event planning was not my favorite. I moved into program management, which is, more of a demand gen role. And I think that my career really, it took off once I went to my first software company. But previous to that, I was at an insurance company in San Francisco. And the role that I had a really good boss, and I was responsible for supporting the strategy and execution side of the business. And so, in like combination with having a really good boss and leader, I also learned the where a strategy is born, how to think about a strategy, how to plan it out, and then how to put that into an execution plan and then get it to go live by working with a very large creative operational team. I learned project management, time management, and then measurement of impact. So that
Hmm.
was all in a very different world and space, but it was super valuable for me as I went into my next job. And that was my first software company. And that's also where the ABM story begins.
Hmm. Excellent. And I guess this is what you mean by I can think at 50,000 feet level and also maybe 5 feet level.
Yeah, definitely. I do think that the strategic nature is um, a natural skill set that some marketers tend to have, and you have to grow it.
Hmm.
But I think most marketers have that execution, right?
Hmm.
Because we have to do it to get to any level. We have to do it.
Right.
We identify that we're strong there and that we like it, or we lean into the strategy. And
Hmm.
then as we grow that, so there's a benefit, of course, as you're growing into your career to really, hold on to the executional aspects and have a lot of respect for the time
Right.
and work that goes into everything, the weeds, the data, the details, the little micro changes.
Hmm.
And then, yeah, the strategic level, I was very drawn to it very early, and ABM very much helped me grow that. And I like to say that I was initially drawn to ABM because, unlike the demand gen role that I was in, it allowed me to slow down and think and be more strategic and
Hmm.
plan, because for the one-to-one motion, there's a lot of planning and slower instead of the what I felt like at the time was very fast moving and reactive. And so I really leaned into that ABM side, and that's, a lot of my strategic skills started to, the seeds were planted.
Awesome. So, what kind of combination? So, let's say I'm sure your aspiration right now is to be leading a marketing team, right? So, between an execution and strategy, what sort of combination would you think is an ideal combination?
Um, wow. I mean, I think it's going to be hugely dependent on the company, right? The
Right.
role that you're taking. The smaller the business you're at, the more you're going to be leaning into that execution standpoint. The more you're going to be asked to roll up your sleeves.
Hmm.
The larger the company, the less you're involved in that. However, it's a really important thing to have access to both. I think that it's going to be dependent on what your team looks like, who you have working under you.
Hmm.
Um, you know, it, for me, I want to say that I think that the strategic side is significantly more important
Hmm.
because you need to see the whole picture,
Right.
but it's also very damaging if you can't see the 5,000 feet,
Right.
if you don't understand what's going on from an execution standpoint, then you actually can't spot the issues as a leader. And as a strategy owner, you're just going to look panicked. You're going to ask your team all the time, and you're not going to necessarily know. So I don't know. I would say it's at least a 60 strategy, 40 execution, but it's not necessarily that 40% of your time you need to be executing. It's that you need to have 40% of that knowledge. You need to be able to be comfortable enough to go into the systems and look around yourself. Because the further away you get from that, the harder I think that it will be the higher up you go when you have to answer questions.
Yeah, I understand. I think that makes sense. So in your current role at ReachDesk, right? So what are the different programs that you're running? What are the challenges? What are your learnings? You've been doing ABM for 7 years, you said, right? So how have you seen ABM evolve, right? From your own personal experience, in general, how people are approaching?
Yeah. So I'll start with what we're doing, what we're running at ReachDesk. So as I mentioned, I wanted to marry ABM and demand generation here. So when I started, it was, priority number one was to improve the demand gen engine, make sure it was running really optimally. And then in conjunction, it was to start out building an ABM strategy. So I had to start with the foundational materials, certain, tools that would help us down the road, certain sales enablement things. The two biggest things to name would be bringing in ABM campaigns and then bringing in the MQA model in order to measure the impact there. Those sound like two things when they're very big and difficult things to tackle in themselves. But we started out with the campaigns. The way I just refer to them as segmented campaigns, but what it really is just coming in. And how I kind of described it was, you had events over here, you had partner over here, you had demand over here, you had social over here, content over here, and each was doing their own thing, and each was, running their responsibilities and putting out the things that they needed to. But when we ran a campaign, I wanted all of that stuff to be interconnected. I wanted the event messaging to match the social messaging to match the gifting messaging that was going out as we were inviting them to these certain things, the content piece to be supportive of what we were speaking at the event, what the SDR team was, messaging. So really just that cohesion of messaging and experience, and allowing the buyer or prospect to have a cohesive experience, to not, with different things. So that was kind of like the initial kind of campaign implementation and change as we were building out the the ABM supporting products,
Right.
and the MQA model. So it's been, oh gosh, how long has it been? I mean, it's been some time since we've implemented that, and we have since implemented what I call like the full funnel ABM, and that is your one-to-many working with demand gen, your one-to-few, bringing in some more segmentation of your campaigns, and then your one-to-one. So we now have all of those running, and then it's just about scaling and finding the ones that are working better, focusing on those, finding ones that maybe are not as impactful, and seeing how we can improve them.
Right. Yeah. So you guys talk about something called all bound. Is it merely a wordplay, or is there some kind of a different framework than a full funnel sort of marketing, which also incorporates ABM?
That's a really good question. So many marketers, many ABMers, anyone that's really in the GTM space, for years we've heard different acronyms and different things. What all bound is, and what all bound engagement is in some ways it's an answer to a question that we've all been asking. It is a connector of existing strategies, if you will. Just to simply say what Allbound is, it's the motion of working across your entire GTM team. That is working across your team with the human capital and working across your strategies, and then bringing in what Allbound engagement is. This is, I feel like, a really interesting one, and it's something that, like I said, it's answering a question for us. It's giving us clarity into what we're all really trying to do. We're all trying to drive more pipeline, drive more revenue. We're all trying to work together and be more collaborative. We know that the GTM team is the core team. We know that we need to be efficient and effective together. We also know the challenges, both from the people side and the campaign side, and the tactics and channels. So Allbound engagement is leveraging a tool and or strategy that creates engagement across your different channels. So ReachDesk is an Allbound engagement tool. And the way that it supports that is it works across all of your channels and all of your teams. So interesting enough, ReachDesk and gifting isn't the only thing that can be an Allbound engagement tool, but it is one. And so what that means is that you can use gifting across your sales, your marketing, your CS, your whole GTM function.
Right.
You can use gifting to increase impact and efficiency across all of your channels, your email, your events, your outreach. And then you can improve certain tactics by leveraging gifting. So it's simply put, it's connecting all of these teams, channels, and tactics together, and it's using something that helps actually break through what is a very noisy and busy landscape. So everybody's trying to figure out, how do we get to X pipeline? How do we get X opportunities? How do we make this channel more efficient? This is what we've been talking about forever in marketing, but really, really a lot the last year and a half. And it's gifting allows you to do that. Gifting allows you to, if you send, an outreach email one way with nothing, no personalization, no gift, you send it with a gift, with some personalization, you're going to be more successful.
So is it also the cohesion that you talked about? So the first time I read Allbound, I thought it's the inbound and outbound, which used to be a different path, right? Is it just marrying of those two bounds and calling it as Allbound? So you put the customer first and the experiences first, and then really try to come up with certain strategies and executions aligned to the customer's buying journey and things like that?
Yeah, I would say yes and no. In that it's not just combining the outbound and inbound motion, right? It's yes, that is happening, but it's not obsessing and focusing on inbound is this, outbound is that. It's removing kind of the barriers and it's connecting the motions, and it's not thinking necessarily. It's looking at the whole number. It's looking at the whole impact. It's looking at the whole team. So it's working all together. So that's why I say yes and no.
Right. That's true. So this is for somebody who's beginning, and I talk to a lot of these companies who are just getting started with ABM, right? And they all think ABM to be a channel. I'm going to start doing ABM, right? Actually referring to, I'm going to add a channel to my existing either a GTM mix or more specifically within marketing, and not realizing that to be a strategy. So is that something that you come across, and how do you sort of answer that question or break that misconception to people who are approaching ABM more as a channel than a strategy?
I mean, I would say that if a marketer thinks that that is a channel or strategy, then, you know, we need to really talk about how ABM is being discussed. It is almost a larger issue that needs to be solved, which I
Right.
have thoughts on if we get to it. If your executive team is saying that, I think that's probably more common
That's right.
where you have the executive team saying that. I mean, marketing is pretty used to, not saying it's easy, but we're pretty used to being hyper focused on, being blamed, having a target on our backs. So I'd say we're kind of used to scrutiny, and we've been at places in our career that there's a lack of understanding. I hate to say this, but it's our job to educate. It's our job to explain that. And personally, I'm very clear. I am very direct. This is not a channel. This is not a tactic. And I say to leaders that, what ABM is a organizational wide strategy. It is not a marketing campaign. And if you expect that, then be prepared to be disappointed. It is required to set your exec team up for the right expectations, that it is not a small shift in focus. And there's a lot to it. So, I mean, yeah, I'd say that, we have to take it upon ourselves as much as we don't need anything else to do,
Right.
to be the loud voice.
No, I think that there is a deeper problem in that kind of an approach, and you're right. I think it's more coming from the exec teams, right? So, okay, you're trying to run a program. Maybe it's a channel that you're doing, right? Now, by adding this channel, right? So, how are you going to show me the ROI? Are you going to improve your lead velocity or your lead pipeline, right? So the thought sort of starts from there, right? Because this is seen as a channel, right? Now adding this channel, let's say adding an event channel, right? So what kind of impact could it have, right? I think it just starts to go very numerical, right? And it's very important at some stage to go and then say, hey, this really very different, right? So don't measure or don't think
Yeah.
this is as a tactic, but as an organization strategy, like you just explained, right? So have you come across and did you have to go through that educative process in the 7 years that you've been doing ABM, and how have you been able to convince them?
I've had to go through it, yes, many times. Just trying to think. I mean, it almost becomes, at some places you can sound like a broken record. You just kind of keep having to beat that drum. Every single organization I've worked at, it's been a different, situation. I've also been at different levels and experiences. So, I almost have all the flavors of having to do it.
Yeah.
I've definitely understood the value of learning the different languages and the focusing on the things that each level cares about, and basically being a marketer, right? Speaking to the persona, showing them the pain points and how we can solve internal ABM, if you will. So the way that you're going to talk to a VP of sales about it, a CRO, is totally different than how you're going to talk to a BDR or an AE or even a BDR manager. You're going to need to focus on the direct impacts that they care about. And so you just, you have to, if you tell a BDR, it's going to increase pipeline by 3x, that doesn't impact how much they get paid.
Hmm.
The opportunity count impacts how much they're going to get paid,
Right.
and time saved on the work that they're doing is going to impact them.
Hmm.
If you are talking to a more senior person, they're going to care a lot about that 3x pipeline. They're going to care a lot more about the conversion rates and the sales cycle changes. And then, the cost of implementing a strategy and the efficiency and ROI, that's going to be, more of a concern for your CFO.
Hmm. Hmm. Interesting. Let's just double click a little bit on the demand gen, right, and versus ABM, right? And I think especially somebody who's just getting started. So there's I've seen people seeing it as an or, right? So I was doing ABM demand gen, and I wanted to shift to ABM, right? We all know that it's you need to have a good demand gen engine working for you to basically get started with ABM, and basically the demand gen engine feeding into ABM, right? Do you have conversations like this, and if so, how do you answer, and what should be the structure? And I think people are struggling to put together, right? So you talked a little bit about how it's done in ReachDesk, right? So if, let's say, just assume somebody who's just getting started, maybe a startup, couple of million in revenue. They're now wanting to implement ABM. Got some programs here and there, like the stage that you talked about, right? So fairly scattered, like a lot of pointed, siloed programs running, right? And for such a company, right? So how should they approach ABM? How could they bring in something like an ABM?
Yeah, I mean, I almost think that I've come to the belief that, they both should
Right.
exist. There's no real reason that you shouldn't have an inbound motion. I mean, unless it just doesn't work for your buyer and
Mm-hmm.
persona. And same goes for the outbound motion, but let's just say they're in software and it
Right.
works. There isn't really any reason why you shouldn't be tapping, turning on both faucets, right? They're both bringing in
Mm-hmm.
revenue. It's all about finding efficiency between both of
Mm-hmm.
them. And so, my advice would truly be like, let's say that they have the demand engine, and they're building, they're wanting to build out the ABM motion. My genuine advice would be to do, to keep the faucet on the demand gen side
Mm-hmm.
on. Do not just turn it off and go over
Right.
here, because you're not going to have anything coming in. And so you have this
Right.
built. You have to kind of build something while something is still
Right.
working. And the goal is to ensure that you're having the most optimization and efficiency with your demand, your inbound channel as you roll out the ABM. But I mean, ultimately, you need to be paying attention to how both are working, and you need to push more on the gas when you see something working
Mm.
more, let's see, in
Mm.
ABM, right? So um, I don't think it should be one or the other. I really don't. And I think that's where the kind of marriage comes
Mm.
in, is getting to a place where we finally have to say, like, you don't have to decide. They both should coexist
Mm.
together. Demand generation is very, very supportive of ABM strategies. It's the umbrella, right? Like everything that you do from a demand side is ultimately trickling down into your ABM and or your outbound motion. It's the warming up. So they might not come inbound, they might not fill out a demo request, but they've already been educated through the funnel.
Mm.
And then when they're ready, when they reach a certain stage, that is when you start the ABM journey.
Mm.
So I mean, that is my that is my personal preference, and that is the advice that I would give. I mean, I did just speak to somebody, recently about this, who is doing demand gen and needs to build an ABM strategy, and so I've shared this with her, and I've, after having done it so many times, I remind them that it takes time to build out. You have to set expectations internally and for yourself,
Hmm.
and you have to kind of really determine what are the internal priorities, and to decide where to start.
Hmm.
I don't really think anyone personally. I don't really think anyone should start ABM with one to one. I think that it should start from the top, one to many, down to one to few, then to one, because it's almost like training
Hmm.
wheels. You're moving from demand generation slowly away to something that's more different as you go down.
Hmm.
And I think that's a really good approach for all of the challenges that you experience.
Hmm.
And I mean, if you're just doing ABM for the first time and you're a small team
Right.
and you can do five one-to-ones a quarter, I mean, that's a lot of investment.
Right.
And if you don't see results immediately, then you're shut down
Correct.
and you're done,
Hmm.
you know?
Hmm. You're just saying ABM is not for me. Maybe it's because you've not done it as well as it should be, right? And then just thinking that framework possibly did not fit. Uh, so
Yeah.
just double click more on it, right? So your demand gen is bringing you some conversations, leads, right? So building pipeline. So you're extracting a specific set of accounts based on some qualification criteria, and you also establish certain stage, and then putting them into, let's say, one to few kind of an ABM bucket, and then going through that motion of converting. Is that the kind of optimal the process that you think these kind of companies should do, or how?
Well, I mean, again, it's going to be really dependent on each company,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But overall, I think you should be looking at your whole ICP,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Those should be getting demand gen initiatives. You should have your accounts, your target accounts selected. They should be the same in marketing as they are in sales. And then your ABM campaigns should be focused on building MQAs for the outbound team.
Hmm.
So you're building that engagement because you're not going to get every single person to do a demo request. So
Right.
you've got that group over there. And then you've got the group that you're warming up to build MQAs. And then once they MQA, the sales team starts to work them, but you're still running campaigns throughout the various stages until they get to close one, and then of course moving to a customer ABM
Hmm.
motion. But yeah, I mean, I do think that they should play off of each other.
Hmm.
I do think that when it comes to the various campaigns, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it.
Right.
The one to many, one to few, one to one. It's almost like a tongue twister. They can be done through stages of the buyer journey. Like that's totally normal. It
Hmm.
can be done based on your tiered accounts strategy. That's also very normal. I prefer to do the more of the funnel stages myself because I think that there's more I think based on my experience, there's more opportunity for impact, and it kind of is it's holding their hand. It's holding their hand through these different campaign experiences. The more engaged you are, the more personalized it gets.
Hmm.
And then I like to do post-op creation one-to-one campaigns because I like to do personalized one-to-ones, and once you're post-op, you have a good handle on what's going on with the account, and so you can really personalize the content and the copy to what their pain points are, their strategy, like what are their KPIs, and really create a unique experience that's really cementing your brand in with them, and really building that relationship. And then also, of course, from revenue perspective,
Right.
you're helping the sales team close their deals.
Hmm.
You're helping them get to the finish line faster.
Right.
And I don't really think there's like a standard or a lot of marketers that do post-op campaign. I don't think that if you asked 50 salespeople. I
Hmm.
don't know if many of them would say, oh, yeah, my marketing team does that, or I feel like they're supported. And I think that it really helps with the alignment and the enablement too.
Hmm. Hmm. Sure. We talk a lot about interfunctional alignment, sales, marketing, maybe in some cases, customer success. What about what kind of alignment, especially this is for larger companies, right? So you are just organized in a way based on specifics. So there's a creative team, there is an maybe an operations team, right? Then there is this digital marketing team, right? When you start doing something, switching from a demand gen, right? So very lead focused, broad, high volume, high velocity kind of campaign, and getting into ABM way where it requires a lot more attention and things like that. So what kind of intra-team uh, collaboration, and this is not a topic that's discussed a whole lot, so I thought I'll get some perspective, right? So how do you align functions even within the marketing team?
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to enablement. And I've definitely had a handful of jobs that I've had to kind of do that. And
Hmm.
I would just say that uh, I today I prefer working for earlier mid startup sizes.
Hmm.
The type of company you work for also, it is more likely that you'll be working with people that know this strategy.
Right.
So I'd say I'm just a little more selective,
Hmm.
because I've done it. It's really hard. It's
Right.
tiring,
Hmm.
but it ultimately comes down to the person that's running ABM. It,
Hmm.
it really does. You have to spend the time. You have to spend the time to explain it. Um, but I think almost like the thing that I have kind of said repeatedly throughout this process when I have had to enable
Hmm.
has really been, don't overthink it. It's
Hmm.
not that different. I've had content like in the past say, okay, so how do we do ABM content? I don't really think that there's like this whole different idea or strategy than what they're already doing.
Hmm.
Other than, there's going to be opportunities and requests that say, hey, we need this one-to-one asset. We want to just personalize it for this account. But
Hmm.
I don't think that the content experience is starkly different
Right.
from non-ABM.
Hmm.
I think it's really only the very personalized content.
Hmm.
Operations, that one's a lot more complicated.
Hmm.
That one's definitely different.
Hmm.
And so, you have to take it upon yourself to explain to your ops team, these are the things that I need to measure. These are the things that I want to be paying attention to. And if it's somebody who hasn't done it before, it can be really hard for them to break um, you know, the the traditional Salesforce campaign, or the everything's on a contact level, because you're looking on an account level. So that can be challenging, but outside of explaining to them, these are the numbers that I need, this is the conversions that we'll be focusing on, and it's looking at it from an account model.
Hmm.
I've had success in connecting my ops people with other ABM ops, that I've either worked with or I know in the space, because they're going to speak a language that I just
Right.
haven't quite gotten fluent in.
Hmm. Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Are there
And
like specific KPI based approaches help in making sure you're hitting, let's say, the targets and things like that? So I'm talking about like if there are dependency, let's say from your creative team, design team, for example, right? So I understand it's part of the whole overall project team, right? Project management effort. Uh, since you've gone through, so what are the some challenges, right? So operational challenges, some of it you just talked about, right? So can those challenges be addressed just by putting, okay, this is the sort of a KPI. I plan a campaign, and then 3 days from now, or 3 days before, I need this creatives, right? So these are the assets that needs to be repurposed, some model like that, is it, or how?
I mean, I wouldn't say that that process would be starkly different than the creative process that is today, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's going through it with your team the first time and
Hmm.
building out that framework together.
Right.
And I almost think it's a learn as you go,
Right.
right? So like in experiences that I've had, what has been beneficial is, and this isn't new, it's having a campaign kickoff.
Hmm.
It's putting together a campaign creative brief,
Hmm.
and it's providing them with all of the assets that we need, all of the variations.
Right.
And then I think that, to really, this has always just been my style.
Hmm.
But I think that it's effective in building this cross collaboration is bringing that creative brief, having that conversation, and then saying to the content team or whatever team you're on, okay, and when can you get this done by? And what is the process that's going to be the most effective to work with your team?
Right.
It goes a really long way to ask what what's their working style,
Hmm.
and fitting in with them instead of forcing them into your way of
Right.
working.
Hmm.
And then it just becomes a little bit easier. I think that a lot of it comes down to the person you have running your strategy.
Right.
If they're not a really good communicator, if they're difficult to work with, like it's
Hmm.
just going to make everything that much harder. I
Okay.
think that there's a level of like human connection
Hmm.
and genuine sincerity in working with your team. Like I've had, when I first started working with sales, I did not like it.
Hmm.
Many marketers might be nodding their
Hmm.
heads. Um, but I stopped fighting what felt like not my own
Hmm.
instinct. And I started just kind of listening and observing and thinking about what their experience was like and what their challenges were. And it sounds really simple, but I just kind of learned, okay, when working with the sales team, let's say you're working one to one with your different AEs, how do they best receive information? How do they like to work together? And then doing the way that the salesperson likes to work and modifying it to make it work for them. Because if you don't have their buy-in, and if you're just pissing them
Hmm.
off, then you're just it's gonna be
Hmm.
harder. And like the number one thing that to this day, like I say all the time, is my strategy and the work that I am here to do is directly to support your team, your numbers, and your
Hmm.
success. I don't know that, you know, I can't speak for anyone specifically, but let's just say that it's been really well
Hmm.
received, and perhaps they haven't had that experience in past.
Right. Just good points. I think so. A lot of times we just talk about strategy and then we don't talk a lot about the execution aspects and challenges and handover and things like that, right? And as you start like involving and going deeper, I think these are some of the problems that you hit, and then it's better to have some sort of a clarity around how you approach. And I think it comes to how you like leverage human relationships and how do you work with people's, let's say, biases and needs and all of that, I suppose.
Yeah, can't take that for granted.
Right, right. Awesome. Just last couple of questions. So, like, we're closing the year, right? So, a lot of teams are now thinking about, or maybe going back to their drawing boards to reevaluate their ABM strategy or kickstarting, right? So, what are the some advices you have for these teams?
Um, well, just for starting the year, I'd have to say, and I don't know if I'm late to the party on this, but I would say starting like one, plan at least 6 months at a time.
Hmm.
Like my life changed dramatically
Hmm.
when I started planning 6 month sprints. and having kind of the year kind of baked out from that perspective. But doing that 3 months before the fiscal year starts. So that's what we do at ReachDesk. And so we are starting planning for H1 of 2024
Hmm.
in the next couple of weeks. We have, we're starting Q4 next week.
Right.
And so we already have that planned.
Hmm.
And we're thinking about what's next. There's a lot less, well, I mean, there's always panic and stress in like every single marketing, day-to-day job,
Right.
but there's a lot less of it in terms of planning. But so I'd say plan early is going to be so beneficial to being able to respond better to the unplanned
Hmm. Hmm.
things. I'd also say that having your priorities, and not just your your KPIs and your OKRs, but having your priorities within your OKRs established firmly, and asking yourself every time you get a new request that wasn't planned,
Hmm.
how much is this going to impact pipeline? How much is this going to move the needle? No matter if you're doing ABM or anything else, we're marketers. We want to support. We want to support driving pipeline. So and we're creative. So when somebody asks us something, we want to do it. If that thing is not going to bring enough value, then don't do it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think that practicing saying no and having your pre-established priorities is definitely a benefit.
Hmm.
And I think the last thing would be to, you know, both ABM and marketers just to keep pushing forward.
Hmm.
It's been a tough time for many of us, and little by little, we're making progress. So just keep pushing forward, because we're all in it together. And for ABMers as a whole, I'd say um, be with your people, because I spent so long
Hmm.
not knowing anyone in ABM,
Hmm.
and the world opens up when you speak with other ABMers. ABMers want to talk to other ABMers, and there are enough of us. We
Right.
are virtual enough. We are global enough. So go where the people are, talk to them. There's tons of them out there. And to the people that I still meet that are newer to ABM and just figuring it out, that's one of the first things they say to me after speaking is, I'm so glad I have somebody to talk to about this. I feel like I'm doing it all by myself.
Hmm.
So if you feel that way, reach out on LinkedIn to people. There are communities out there. I just came across ForgeX, an ABM community, and I'm very impressed with their offerings and templates. And um, this is a place that I think ABMers should be.
Cool. Don't reinvent the wheel. The wheel has been invented. Try and then make use of it. Excellent. Amber, this has been a fascinating conversation. So thanks for your insight. A lot of things that we've discussed. Hopefully, some of it is going to be very useful for some of our audiences. Thank you so much for taking time. Any parting thoughts, comments? How can people reach out to you? LinkedIn, I suppose.
Yeah, LinkedIn's always the best place.
Okay.
So yeah, and I think that I said a lot of parting comments. So I'll leave it.
Sure.
I'll leave everybody alone now.
Sure. Excellent. Thank you so much.